Countries, over 2,000 languages, but united with similar interests. As news breaks, we give you in-depth analysis around Africa every Monday on Core TV News. A very big thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the program Around Africa, where we bring to you top issues rocking the continent. I'm your host, Brownson, Nnwana. Today we'll be looking at the poverty syndrome in Africa. Africa is a continent rich with so many natural resources, starting from the petroleum resources to resources like gold, silver, and then you can go on and count them. But the big question has been, why is Africa still dependent? Why are we still seen as the dumping ground to the other, big nations? We'll be digging deep and, of course, bringing out results on the program today. Bala Zakar is joining me on the program. Bala, good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
And, of course, that handshake, it shows the true spirit of Africa.
Correct.
Of which we are. But if you want to look at it in terms of our economy and in the lives of the people, it doesn't reflect that. How would you explain that?
Well, the reasons are not far-fetched. You know, there is this saying that the seed of growth and development can only be planted, soiled, and watered on what? On the soil of peace. X-ray Africa and see today, right? Where is the peace? Everything you see is distrust and fragility. And if that is what we are seeing in Africa, how can you plant the seed of growth, development, and progress when you don't have the soil of peace? That simply tells you the reasons why, first of all, fundamentally, we can't grow. Because if you don't have peace, you will not have security. If you don't have security, you will not have stability. And if there is no stability, political governance will be out of the way, right? Economic governance will be thrown through the window. Infrastructural developments will not be there. So most of the reasons, though fundamental, but they are not far-fetched. We see them everywhere, across all the flanks of Africa.
At what point do we say a continent is poor? At what point can we describe any continent as being poor?
Well, when you talk about poverty, poverty on its own, it's an index. An index is a measurement or a figure that has a range, right? So it depends on the way and the classification and the context. A country can be poor when you look at it from an educational point of view, right? A country can be poor when the healthcare system is in decay, right? A country can be poor when it is suffering from natural calamities like floods, right? Like when you have desert encroachment and the rest. So the point of classifying a country as being poor depends on the context. But what we know is this: a country is described as negatively poor, right, when its leaders refuse to be generational and futuristic in their thinking. That's one. When its leaders refuse to deliver the dividend of leadership. A country will definitely be poor, get stagnated or stunted when its leaders refuse to do what? When its leader practically refuse to use their human resources or human capital. So in situations like that, it simply tells you leadership plays a role. Why do we say leadership play a role? Because leaders are expected to lead. Even though you say they are expected to lead, they are actually supposed to coordinate. And what do they coordinate? They coordinate respective thoughts, political thoughts, religious thoughts, social thoughts, economic thoughts, synchronize them and use that as their weapon to lead. And when you want to do that, you need to have supportive lieutenants. Supportive lieutenants must be real technocrats in different fields of endeavors.
Are we saying so far the leaders in Africa they've not really been meeting up to that?
They've not. They are below par. And that's the reason. Because one thing you need to understand is, even if you are a creative lieutenant, and I mean leader, and you are focused. If you have the wrong lieutenants, you're not going to make any progress, because deliverance of the dividends of leadership has to do with the team, not the individual. The individual, you can demonstrate individual skills and dexterity, but scoring the goal requires a team effort. But even when you talk about the team, somebody leads the team. And who leads the team? The leaders. And what makes you a leader? The leader does not mean you are ingrained with all the technical knowledge. What you need to succeed as a leader, first of all, is to be a generalist, right? When you are a generalist, you appreciate every sector, right? You appreciate your educational sector. That means you need to do something, whether on science and technology, agriculture, whatever, creative arts and the rest, right? You need to have some flexibility when it comes to social needs of your people, right? If you live in a country, or you're leading a country where you have religious diversity, you also need to manage that. But at the end of the day, what makes you a leader actually is not that you are an expert in anything, but your ability to coordinate all the sectors, all the philosophies, all the ideologies, and use that to lead or to be at the front. And when you have supportive lieutenants who basically will be your think tank, somebody will be a guru in healthcare, somebody will be sound in IT, another person may be good in agriculture, another person may be good in environmental management, another person may be good in trying to reconcile sectarian differences, right? When those people package themselves with the required integrity, you must succeed.
Now, let's bring us to the big one. Africa is so much rich with so much natural resources. We've seen the so-called big brothers of the world coming to this continent to, I don't want to say steal, to take some of our resources and develop their own part of the country. Why haven't the leaders now in Africa, in total of the continent, why are they not seeing the opportunities that is like, or that is bestowed upon the continent?
I keep saying every time that other big brothers who are leaders in other countries don't actually come here to steal anything from us. We are the product of our stunted growth. And that is why when you are a leader, first of all, you must have that creativity, right? Have good and supportive lieutenants, then have the firepower to be at the front. Be ready to accept blames, right? Be open and flexible when it comes to accepting solutions, right? When you look at leaders in other countries, like we said, they think and plan generationally. And when you say thinking and planning generationally, it simply means I am in my 40s now, but I can plant seed whose gestation periods will economically boost and trust my country probably in 50 years' time. And I can tell you in 50 years' time, I may not be among the living. And that is why we said they think and plan generationally. When you look at the Lee Kuan Yew's, right, of Singapore, that's just one example. It tells you how people think and plan generationally. When you look at some Japanese companies, they set a plan whose medium term or short term may even be like 40, 50 years. Then long term may be 100 or 200 years. They will say in 100 years time, we expect to have A, B, C, D. In 100 years time, most of them will not be among the living, but they think about the generations to come. And once you think and plan like that, selfishness is removed, right? When you think and plan like that, you look for the credible people. And once you do that, definitely your country is going to grow.
Now, let's go back to memory lane. I think this is very, very important. Now, let's trace this thing back so that we'll know where the problem started from, the problem of poverty and starvation, hunger that is really facing some part of the continent right now. Before colonization, before colonization side coming to Africa, would you say at that point the continent was a little stabilized before colonialism?
The continent was crudely stabilized, right? Because you have leaders who were using their knowledge, whether you could call it of feudalistic, you know, or I don't want to say diabolic, or cultural linings to lead the people. But when you talk about dynamism, dynamism simply means expectation to receive changes. And when you expected to receive changes in Africa, yes, the leaders of before were leading in their own way when our people were probably half naked. But when you start expecting dynamism, when you start expecting to share things, of course, you should be open to education, right? You should be open to the use of cars. You should be open to the use of mechanized agriculture and everything, which some of the leaders did. But the question is this: along the line, I can't tell you exactly when, people started distrusting one another. People started introducing primordial sentiments, and we started having leaders in their respective countries who are sectarian, who are sectional, who were not working in national interest. And once you're not working in national interest, then nepotism comes in. The section of your country comes in, and you don't take national interest, credit, merit, and integrity into consideration.
Could that be as a result of civilization?
No, civilization comes with its positives and negatives. When there is civilization, civilization comes with its own threats. Let's assume I ended up being a credible leader, right, based on integrity. But we notice that the introduction of science and technology will positively aid my country, but my own side of the country is purely illiterate. But I ended up just being a prince or an icon. If I don't think in national interest, I will want to protect my people with their level of education, right, which is at the lower side of the scale. If I decide to be sectional, right, and I bring in primordial sentiments, I will not look at the national country and bring a credible person to lead if he is from a different part of the country. I would rather be looking for my own person. And when I begin to do that, gradually, I begin to compromise what? Standards. And once you start diluting standards, one day, everything about your growth will start nosediving and you will eventually collapse.
That's a very big one. At this point, let's go for a very quick break. And then when we come back, we'll be looking at solutions. How can we come out of this poverty, or once a stage poverty that is really rocking the continent? We'll be back. Stay with us.
You can now watch Core TV News live from anywhere in the world on our website, www.coretvnews.com. Click on Live TV on our website and watch us live.
And welcome to Core TV Primetime Days.
To follow us on Twitter, click on Twitter icon on our website. And Facebook, click on the Facebook and YouTube to see all our previous news production. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Click Core TV, leave a space, then News. Core TV News, a 24-hour news station.
A very big thanks for staying with us. You've been watching Around Africa on Core TV News, and of course on the program today we've been looking at poverty syndrome in Africa, and of course Balazaka is still with me in the studio. And now let's come to the population part of it. And how would you say population poverty as a whole has really affected the economic growth of the people, and has it affected the life of its population?
Yeah. First of all, everything hinges on leadership, right? Before you become a leader, you need to get yourself prepared. But let's assume we have accidental leaders. You can be an accidental leader. A king can die, you are appointed, right? A president can die, you are appointed. But even at that point, you need to ask yourself something. As a leader, you will be remembered for two things. For either of two things. The problem you solve for your people, or the problems you created for your people. You will be remembered for one of this. That's one thing as a leader. Then when you look at leaders, we still say, you must not be a specialist, but you need to think and plan. And if you want to plan, what do you do as a leader? You plan with one key index, right? A macroeconomic index. You look at your population. That's the first thing. You start from there. What is the population of my country or my local government or my state? That's the way you start from, because every other thing will be built around that. The kind of manpower you're going to get, the kind of investment you're going to do on the people will be based on that. So when you look at the population, then you look at the demography of the population. And from the demography of the population, you look at the population you can best describe as aging. You will give them a classification. Aging may be 70 and above, 40 from, you look at the youth, you look at the upcoming generation. Then now you start looking at basic things that they need. Feeding, agriculture. With this X population, which children are of this age? Of old age and that. Once you start thinking about how to feed, then the next thing, how do you sustain their health? Medicals coming, right? Because once somebody can feed, he's likely to be alive. But even if the person is alive, he needs to be healthy. So you think about medicals. Medicals will determine how do you distribute medical amenities, hospital, dispensaries. Then before you know, how do you build for the future? That's where education comes in, right? You ask yourself very simple questions. How many engineers do we have today? And how do we go into science and technology? How many medical doctors do we have to enhance our health? How many journalists do we have today, and how do we build tomorrow? I mean, more journalists tomorrow to sell ourselves politically, right? The moment you start thinking about this, everything becomes easy. But like on the side of agriculture, you look at what volume of land do I have? These are elementary things. On the volume of land, what volume of land is occupied by water, and which one is free land? And if you're able to come up with that, the very simple thing, people must eat.
Now, Balazaka, let me also remind you that as far as the continent is concerned, we have so much, just like you rightly mentioned, we have lots of medical doctors, we have lots of engineers, we have lots of surveyors, and we have lots of professionals, barristers, name them. But the problem has always been how well have they impacted the continent with their knowledge?
When they come out with the knowledge, regardless of where they read, especially in diaspora, and they come back, they will come to just discover that there has been no investment, right, of infrastructures for them to deploy the knowledge acquired. That has been the basic thing. When you talk about agriculture, you expect that when you go, you become a guru in seed, in cross fertilization of this, that, to come up with good crops and the rest. And you come and you see thick forests, field areas, right, that have become Sambisas. What do? Miscreants and criminals have taken those lands. Ordinarily, when you go, you study agriculture, you come back, right? What are you supposed to? You come, you meet this kind of lands, then the government will support you. You come with the knowledge, keep sharing, make sure there is food abundance. The same thing with people who read medicine. By the time you come, and you discover that common scanner machines are not there, what do? You discover that there is no light. The generators are not there. How do you operate using torchlights, right? Knowing that in where you're coming from, as a student, you were trained and taught on how to use lasers, right, to treat people that have carcinomas and the rest. So most of the time, and how do you go? You become maybe a photojournalist. And you come and you discover there are no cameras. In fact, there is no generator. I mean, you have to run on generator. These are fundamental things. Because when you go outside maybe Nigeria or outside African countries to school, you enter the same year with somebody who is a Japanese, who is an American, who is a Canadian. You are trained based on the same modules. And by the time you get back to your respective home countries, the infrastructures that your government have invested in that are supposed to be waiting for you to actualize your dreams are the things that will be missing. And those are the things that will make the difference between you and the other person who was a German, an American, a Japanese, or a Canadian.
Now let's look at the permanent solution. How well can we eradicate poverty on the continent permanently?
The first thing we need to do to eradicate poverty is to reduce the degree of conflict. Let there be peace. If you go to Angola, you will imagine the number of years Jonas Savimbi has been fighting till he got killed. Go to Liberia, you will see what has been happening. Go to Uganda, you will see what the Lord Resistance Army have been doing. Go to Somali and Somaliland. Recently, the newest country in the continent, in the whole world, it's South Sudan. For years, they've been fighting between the Sudan of Khartoum and the Sudan of Juba. The Sudan of Juba were given independence. They have oil, they have everything. Their population as a whole is not up to half the population of Lagos in Nigeria. Has there been peace between Silva Kiir and Rich Marshall? In a small country like that with the abundance of oil, that simply tells you that the common denominator across the continent that has been ravaging and destroying the continent first is peace. Once you have that peace, people can settle and manage their lives, while political leaders continue to tinker and play around with the mathematics that will make them lead their country. If you don't have peace, local farmers cannot plant seeds. They cannot grow anything. And there will be hunger and poverty in the land.
All right, of course, we just hope that very soon the African leaders would really get things right and make sure that someday things will be done rightly so that peace, just like Vala Zaka say, will return back to the continent. Thank you very much, Zaka, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
And I hope that you're obliged to my call next time.
Anytime.
All right. That's Around Africa for this week. We'll be back again next week with another bomba episode. Thank you very much for being there. My name is Brownson, Nnwana. Have a wonderful day.
Continent, 54 countries, over 2,000 languages, but united with similar interests. As news breaks, we give you in-depth analysis around Africa every Monday on Core TV News.